Hello and welcome to Abuse Recovery Success. We are in season 5 and I have a fantastic guest in store for us today. I hope all you listeners know that the purpose of this podcast, and especially season 5, is to really spread light and inspire you. We want to share inspirational stories, and today that is what we are about to hear, because we have Melody, who is our reigning Miss Universe of South Africa, an activist, as well as a co-author. And I'm excited to hear about all the other things you're doing in addition to those major things. But first, Melody, welcome to Abuse Recovery Success.
Thank you so much for having me, April. I'm so honored to be on this platform, and I'm so grateful to be, sharing my story. And I hope that I can inspire people out there.
I think that you will, Melody. And, my team found you a while ago, and due to our fault, we weren't able to get you on the show sooner. But I think, I'm a big believer that everything happens for a reason. And this season 5 is really quite a season. And, in one of my previous episodes, I shared a little bit with the listeners that, we're going to call our listeners for this podcast Bright Lights. And, one of the reasons my team really was drawn to you, we found you on social media, was because clearly you're a bright light. So, Melody, without further ado, go ahead and share with the listeners your story of what you've been through and who you are today.
All right. So I think let me just introduce myself properly. So my name is Melody Zondo. I'm the reigning Mrs. Universe South Africa for 2020 and 2021. I am a gender-based violence activist. So I do a lot of work to create awareness on gender-based violence, mainly because I'm a survivor of abuse myself. At a very young and early age, I found myself in an abusive relationship with somebody that I thought was going to be my forever after. And unfortunately, it didn't happen that way. I'm also a published co-author. I actually contributed my story of abuse to a book that was edited by a renowned author called Sunyati. It's a book called When Secrets Become Stories, and it's a collection of abuse stories from, women coming together from all different walks of life and just sharing, their experiences in order to create awareness and to educate people out there about what abuse is. And a little bit about where I come from and how I grew up. So I come from one of the biggest townships in South Africa called Soweto. I was raised by a beautiful, phenomenal woman, my late great-grandmother. Unfortunately, both of my parents, they were absent, so they were not in my life due to, certain circumstances. And so I found myself, wanting validation from a very early age because, I was very confused about how I didn't experience and I did not receive, love from people that were supposed to teach me what love is. And that's your parents, Mm-hmm. And so I grew up, wanting to belong. I grew up just wanting to be loved because I felt very rejected by my parents. And so that confusion, that rejection, that pain and the trauma that comes, with that rejection from my parents, it really manifested itself into how I handled relationships with the opposite sex. Mm-hmm. And so there came a time in my life when I was about 16 or so, I started rebelling a little bit. I started, hanging out with the wrong crowds and also just looking for attention from the opposite sex. And so I started, dating at school. And I remember, the very first boyfriend that I had at school, it just made me feel good. I felt loved. And that is something that I've always looked for. And so that was the beginning, of a cycle of accepting and taking less than what I deserved just because I wanted to feel loved. And so I think the way that I grew up, I think the rejection that I felt as a child, it had a lot to do with the choices that I made much later on in life, especially when it comes to romantic relationships. And so, yes, that was the beginning, really, of this cycle, of bad relationships. And so after I finished school, I was fortunate enough to get a job And so I started working because I couldn't go to university, unfortunately, because finances were just not available for me to be able to do that. And so while I started working, I meet this guy and I think to myself, he is the perfect man for me. I think mostly because, he gave me the attention that I craved so much. And he was just so attentive and he just wanted me to do my best, so he would encourage me because I remember at the time I was working full time and studying part time. So he would encourage me, to pursue my dreams. And, he just made me feel like there was nothing I couldn't do, and that was in the beginning of the relationship. But that slowly turned into control. And that's where it all started. Very early on our relationship, he would tell me things like, I can't wear certain outfits because he felt they were too sexy. He would tell me things like, I cannot wear makeup because he felt whenever I wore makeup, I looked more beautiful, And so it started with the small things like that. And it made life a little bit difficult for me in that at the time I was working as a receptionist for a company. And so as a receptionist, you're the face of the company. And so you need to look the part, And so now I'm caught between wanting to please this man, but also wanting to be the best that I can be at my job. But ultimately he won, he won because to me, what was more important was that I keep him happy and I please him because I didn't want to lose him. Because remember, this was a man who was giving me all that attention that I needed, from a male counterpart, which is something that I never had, in life. And so I gave in. I gave in to all his controlling ways. I would stop wearing makeup. I started not really looking after myself in terms of my image. And I toned everything down. So from the clothes that I would wear to the hairstyle I would have at the time, I even stopped talking to my male friends because he felt that as a female and a male, you cannot be friends. He would say it's impossible for two people of different sexes to be friends. And so I lost contact with my male friends. And then slowly but surely, he started isolating me from my friends as well and my family. So every extra time that I had, I spent with him. And at the time, I obviously didn't understand what was happening. I just thought to myself, this man just wants to be with me. So I was glad in a way, he just wants to spend time with me. What is wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with wanting to spend time with somebody that you love. And so, I just gave into everything that he wanted because I so desperately wanted to please this man and keep this relationship because I honestly, deep down in my heart, I thought that we were going to end up married and, just have a life forever together. And so that's how it started. So the red flags were always there. And I think any abuse survivor will tell you that the red flags were there from the beginning, but we have a tendency of ignoring it. But I also think it's a woman thing, it's a woman intuition where we like to give people the benefit of the doubt. Nobody's perfect. And so we just kind of accept, what is happening. And so I did that. And probably within the first 6 months or so of the relationship, the control, started becoming verbal abuse, where if I did something he didn't like, he would call me certain names. He would tell me how stupid I am and that I'm not smart enough. He would tell me things I'm not beautiful enough, And so that kind of diminished my confidence, slowly but surely. And I found myself in a place where I was questioning everything about myself. I was questioning my worth. I was questioning my intelligence. I was questioning the kind of human being that I am, to such a point that I felt like I was the problem in the relationship, And then from the verbal abuse, it then moved on to the emotional and mental abuse. And he would attack, for instance, my parents' character, because he knew the kind of upbringing that I had, because I had shared with him, because we were in a relationship. And so at times when we would argue, he would use that against me, and say mean things about my parents and how they did such a bad job to raise me, And so, yeah, it was, it was such an awful time, but I still, I held on. I still held on. I thought to myself, this is not the man that I fell in love with. This is not the man that I met, a couple of months ago. And I just thought just maybe if I spoke a certain way, things would change if I behaved a certain way. And I was so wrong, because from that point on, that changed into the physical abuse side of things. And I remember the very first time that it actually happened, we were having one of our best days. And when I say best days, I mean, there were no arguments. We were chilling at his place, playing music. It's a Sunday afternoon. He had cooked for me because he was a great cook. And we were really just it kind of reminded me of how things used to be when we first met, And so we stayed indoors and we having lunch and all of that. And then late in the evening, I say to him, I'm tired. It's been a long day. I would like to now, just sleep, because tomorrow is Monday. I would like to be nice and fresh for work. And so I'm going to have an early evening. And I remember after saying that to him, he says to me, well, I'm not ready to sleep. And he starts making sexual advances at me. And so I say to him, but I don't want to, not tonight, And so he tries again for the second time. And I say to him, no, it's not happening tonight. And then the third time he says to me, well, it has to happen. So he got a little bit aggressive. And then I got annoyed by that, because I felt like, as a man, you should never, force yourself on your woman. If she says no, no means no. Exactly. And so after the third time that he had, tried, I say to him, but I'm now saying it in a very assertive way. And it's something that he was not used to, because, I was always very timid. But now this time, because I'm a little bit annoyed with him, I'm very assertive. So I say to him, I said no, and I'm going to sleep now. You can continue watching TV or whatever it is that you want to do, but I'm going to sleep. And I remember after saying that, there was that awkward silence where I was wondering, like, okay, this is strange, because, I'm used to, if I say something like that, he attacks back. This time, there was that awkward silence for like a couple of seconds. And then the next thing I know is he just started hitting me. I had my back towards him. And so he was punching me, he was punching my back, and he's punching. And I think I was so shocked by what was happening that I just lay there. I lay there. I didn't say anything. I didn't do anything. I think it was just that shock going through my body that this is really happening to me, And then eventually reality clicks and I'm like, oh my gosh, this man is hitting me. So I start screaming and I'm asking him and begging him to stop hitting me. And I remember he didn't want to. He kept saying things like, how dare you deny me? You're my woman. If you don't give me sex, where am I supposed to get it from? It's your job. It's your duty. That's what you're supposed to do. But he's hitting me while he's saying all these things. And I'm screaming. And then eventually one of his other roommates, she starts saying that, she's going to call the police because she can hear, that what's happening. And so when she did that, he stopped. He stops. And we basically just lay there for the rest of the evening, for the rest of the night. I just curled up, like a little child, and I couldn't even cry. And that's the thing, like I couldn't even cry. I think I was just so shocked at what was happening because, for one, I never thought that it would go that way. I always knew that, he's verbally abusive and all of those things, and he's jealous and he's controlling. But I honestly never thought that it would actually, result in him being physical with me. And so it was just that shock. But the second thing is I grew up seeing my mom being physically abusive. There was a point in time when she was in a relationship and she was being abused, and I witnessed all of it happen. And I made a promise to myself that I would never get in a relationship like that. And so I was very disappointed at myself that I was allowing this to happen to me. And so I lay there just in shock, and morning comes, I pack my things, I take a bath, I leave, and I tell him it's over, because I knew that it would happen again. And I knew from that very first encounter, I knew that it would happen again. And so I leave, we go our separate ways. But like any survivor would tell you, we have a tendency of forgiving. I don't know what it is, but he begged me. He sent me flowers. He sent me what seemed like 1 million text messages just asking for forgiveness, saying that, he just lost his temper and that he's never done this before and it will never happen again. He just wants to love me. He doesn't want to hurt me. So after about some time that, he had been begging me to take him back, I did. I took him back and things were okay for a while. But, the cycle always comes back. You're okay for 2 days. And then for the rest of the week, for the other 5 days, it's going back to those old habits where he's calling me names. He's accusing me of sleeping around. I mean, it was just ridiculous. Like, for instance, when we would go out in public, let's say we're going to a movie or something, every single time a guy would look at me, he would accuse me of knowing that guy, whoever he was, and that I was sleeping with that person. And so we would make plans, for instance, to go out, but those plans would never come to fruition because we would get to the movies and then an argument would start because in his mind, I'm cheating on him. And so we would go back home. And then obviously when we get home, because we're now in a private space, I would get a beating after an argument. And so it was that cycle that kept repeating itself over and over and over and over again for years, until it came to a point where I'm not going to say I accepted that behavior, but I won't even say comfortable, but it was a familiar, kind of behavior. So I would be more surprised if he didn't beat me than if he did, And so the very last time I remember when he put his hands on me, I had actually decided at the time that I didn't want to be in the relationship anymore, but I was kind of planning how I would get out of it. And so I remember that Saturday I was at his place and I just decided I want to go home. I was there for a couple of hours and then I said to him, listen, I don't think, I want to stay later than this. I'm going to go home. I will see you next weekend. And he said to me, you are not going anywhere. You have nowhere to go. I know if you leave here, you're going to another man. And that is not happening under my watch. And so I got up, we were sitting on the couch and I was like, okay, I'm not going to argue with this man. I'm tired of arguing because, we argued a lot. There were a lot of arguments. And so I got up. I didn't say anything. I just started walking away. And I said to him, well, I'm leaving. Goodbye. And I remember at the time, I had long braids, like something similar to what I have now. And I remember all I could feel was him grabbing my hair as I was walking away from him. And he pulled me towards him. And I remember falling to the floor. And I'm trying to protect myself and, not to feel so much pain because he's really, holding on to my hair as if you're not going anywhere. And I'm on the floor, I'm screaming my lungs out. I'm begging him to let me go. And when all of this was happening, he had moved to another apartment complex and his mom and his sisters were staying right next door to him. And so when I'm screaming, I'm really just asking them for help because I knew they were home, at that time. So I'm screaming, thinking, please, somebody come to my rescue. I felt like the amount of aggression he had that day, it was different from what he had done before. So there was something that felt different, and I felt like this man is going to kill me today.
Yeah.
So I'm screaming. And then eventually they come to the door, they knock, and they're like, what is happening? Open the door. He says to them, nothing is wrong. We're just having an argument. You guys go back. I've got this under control. Mind your business, basically. And I think what surprised me is how they actually listened to him, although during this time I'm screaming and telling them that he is hitting me. And they go back. They go back to the apartment. So he drags me by my hair. I'm on the floor just trying to fight him off. He drags me into the bedroom. He takes my phone. He takes out my SIM card. He says to me, you need to stay here. I'm going to lock you up here until you come down and you can, speak like a rational person. Because, I'm crying and I'm in pain and all of those things. And so he locks me in the bedroom. This is Saturday, like Saturday lunchtime. He locks me in the bedroom. I open the windows. I'm screaming, thinking maybe somebody else in the apartment complex will come and rescue me or call the police or do something. And nothing happens. Nobody comes to my rescue. Nobody's even curious to say what is going on. Nobody knocks on the door. Absolutely quietness, silence, nothing. So I come to a realization that I'm on my own. I'm on my own. And for me, the important thing at that point in time was to stay alive. I thought to myself, I don't want to make him more aggressive because I really, really felt like if I did any small thing at that moment, it was honestly going to get much more uglier than it was. And so I just decided, you know what, I'm going to get into bed because there's nothing much I can do anyway. I can't call anybody. I don't have my SIM card in my phone. So he keeps checking on me to see, am I calm? Am I willing to talk? He's even asking me. And till today, I can't understand, like, how does that even make sense to you? He keeps coming back and he's like, are you calm now? Do you want to talk? And I just kept quiet. And so he brings me food. I obviously don't want to eat. I don't want to do anything. All I wanted to do was to get out of that apartment. Sunday comes. It's exactly the same. He gives me food, tells me I need to eat. But I'm locked in this bedroom. I haven't been to the bathroom. I haven't taken a bath. I haven't been able to reach any of my family members or friends or anybody. And his family doesn't come to find out if I'm okay. It's a day later and nobody comes to check up on me. And so Monday morning comes, we have to go to work, and he calls my boss, tells my boss that I'm sick, I'm not coming into work, and gives me my SIM card and says to me, you can go home now. I'll see you tomorrow. And I was like, okay, so this is where we are. But there was nothing surprising about that behavior because this had happened before, where he would beat me and then we just continue like nothing happened. And so I pack my bags, I go to the doctor just to make sure that I'm not hurt, physically, because that was like the worst beating I ever got from him. Luckily, nothing was broken. It was just, cuts and bruises, and I was fine. And then at that point, I decide, okay, this man is going to kill me. I need to get out of this relationship. I tell him, I do not want to see you anymore. If you even come to my workplace, I'm going to get a restraining order. We're done. And then a few weeks later, after that, probably 3 weeks, maybe a month after that, I find out I'm pregnant. And it's his child. And so now I have to make a decision, what am I going to do? And deep down inside of me, I knew that I did not want to give up the pregnancy. And to me, I thought I can do this on my own, but I felt he needed to know that I'm pregnant. It's only fair. So I tell him that I'm pregnant and he's happy about it. Because I think for him, as an abuser, and, they manipulate the situation very much to kind of take advantage of you. He says to me, no, that's fine. If you want to do this on your own, that's okay. But I would like to be present when you go for your scans and all of that. And I would like to be like emotionally and financially supportive towards you. So I said, no problem. We'll do it that way. But obviously he wins me back, during the time of pregnancy because, I'm pregnant, I'm vulnerable, my hormones are raging. And so we get back together and he's okay for some time, even after, I give birth. I have a healthy baby girl, beautiful happiness. We all happy. We are this young family. We buy a house together even. So I'm thinking to myself, maybe the pregnancy was our saving grace. Maybe that's what is going to save our relationship. But it didn't take long after that, after I had our daughter, that, the abuse started once more. Where he would tell me that I'm fat now because, I just gave birth. I shouldn't wear certain things. I look disgusting and this and that and that. And at that point, I felt, okay, this is the final and the last straw. And I think my daughter was my saving grace because now I can't just think about myself. I have to think about her. She's a baby. She's young. What's going to happen should anything happen to me? What's going to happen to her? And so I started saving money. Luckily, I had my own bank account. We didn't share bank accounts. So I started saving money and I started looking for a place without his knowledge. Obviously, I'm doing all of this without his knowledge. And while I'm busy doing that, he buys a gun. So one day he just rocks up at home and he has this safe. He opens up the safe and it's a gun. So I say to him, but why do we need a gun? We stay in one of the safest neighborhoods. Security is like a priority where we stay. So we really don't need a gun. He tells me, no, it's for security. But I knew that gun he bought to intimidate me. He bought so that he could put me in my place, if I can put it that way, because after I had my daughter, I found there was like this new confidence that I had, where I would question him about certain things. And I was basically saying no, which is something that he never got used to. And so I think it was just to intimidate me that I just want to remind you who I am. And so at that point, I knew that I would be the first victim that he was going to use this gun on. And thank God that I was able, to make my plan successful. So I found myself a place. I basically moved out of that home with my clothes. I didn't care about, the furniture that I bought and the money that I invested in that home. I just wanted my safety and the safety of my daughter and to move on with my life. And I was able to do that. And for some time, for a long, long time, he threatened me, even after we were not together. And eventually I said to him, you know what, I'm going to get a restraining order against you. So it's your choice, how you want to handle it. And after I said that to him, I remember he kept away. He wouldn't see our child. He was just not present at all. And so that's the kind of relationship we've had ever since. And that's the kind of relationship he has with our child, where he's kept a distance. He's not available. He's not around. It's literally been years since we last, heard from him. And it's just been one of those experiences. And so, yeah, that's basically in a nutshell, because there's so much more that I can tell you about my experience, but that's basically my story on my abuse, that I went through. And this is something that happened over 5 years of my life. And I was very young because we started dating when I was about 18 and I left when I was about 22, 23. And so, yeah, it was a good 5 years that I had to endure, multiple types of abuse. And I did it all by myself. I suffered in silence. Nobody knew anything, not even my mom. I mean, my mom is late now, and, she went to her last resting place without even knowing what I went through, because there's so much shame that comes with being an abuse victim, that we take that burden and we carry it, ourselves. And we don't want to talk about what we're going through because society has made it impossible for us to do that, And for me, I think I'm so grateful for the Mrs. Universe South Africa platform, because that gave me my voice. That platform gave me a chance to say, I don't want to carry this stigma anymore, because I kept this secret for over 20 years. Over 20 years, nobody knew what had happened. And now I'm just so alive and I'm so happy to be sharing my story in any and every platform that I can, because I know that this is not a problem that we have in South Africa only. I know this is a global issue that women go through. And it's important for us, to bring it out and talk about it and break the silence. That's the beginning of us saying, we're not going to do this anymore. By keeping quiet, that violence is going to thrive. It's going to thrive and it's going to keep happening. And so we need to shine the light and put the spotlight on abuse so that it stops. And breaking the silence has always been my motto. I remember when I started my campaign, when I started my Mrs. Universe South Africa journey, I went with the motto, silence hides violence.
Oh, that's good, yeah.
Yeah, because that's exactly what happens. When we are silent about it, we are hiding it. And so we need to break this silence. And I'm hoping that women from everywhere around the world can just see how important it is for us to actually talk about this issue.
Absolutely, I agree. I want to ask you a little bit about first of all, I want to say I related to a lot of it. I've never been in an adult physically violent relationship for the most part. I was, my childhood with trauma was really dark. But what I related to is kind of how you really positioned it for the listener, which I think is helpful, Melody. You talked about how that foundation of needing validation and feeling like you didn't have those really influential people that are supposed to love us, and how that really set you up in this stage of accepting so much less and being just so eager for love. Because, obviously going through what I've been through with, my father was my abuser. And then after the abuse was done, he was absentee. And I definitely have always struggled with really, really seeking that validation from men, I think. And I think you really said it beautifully, because what is important is that people, we have to have empathy for ourselves. We're so good at empathizing with somebody else and seeing their pain, but we tend to be really hard on ourselves. And like you said, you had this shame, you kept this secret for 20 years, but now hearing you tell your story, I can feel and see that you have self-forgiveness and you understand really the whole process. But what I wanted to ask was, do you feel like when you saw some of those red flags, because sometimes we might have a listener that's actually listening because they're trying to figure out what's going on in their current situation. When you were seeing some of those red flags, what do you feel like was going through your head? And you talked about it a little bit, like, oh, I'm thinking maybe he wants to spend a lot of time with me. That's okay. But did you talk to any friends or family, and were they concerned for you? Like, hey, that's weird, he won't let you do that, or tell me about that.
So when I saw all these red flags, like most women, I ignored them. I made excuses for his behavior. The one thing about him is that, he suffered a lot of depression. He actually attempted suicide twice, because of issues that he had growing up, seeing his parents get divorced. So every single time I would see these red flags, I would feel sorry for him. That Mel, just remember, this is what he's had to deal with, don't be so hard on him. It's just clothes. What difference does it make? It's just clothes. They don't define who you are. Wearing a longer skirt is not going to change your life. So why do you have a problem changing it? So I would switch and take the blame, for the red flags, and how maybe if I didn't talk back to him, I wouldn't get a beating. But when all of this was happening, nobody knew. Nobody knew. All I would say to my friends, because obviously they asked, like, but when are we going to get to spend time with you?
Yeah.
Like, ever since you met this guy, and we know you're in love and everything, but ever since you met this guy, we don't see you. And I'd be like, oh, you guys are just jealous, let me spend time with my man. How
I like
it is.
it. Yeah.
I managed to really cover it up so well that people didn't kind of, think something was wrong, because I became a very good student of his, I learned how to manipulate people and how to lie,
Yeah.
And so I took those characteristics from him, and like, let me just tell them this and tell them that. And they took it. They took it and they ate it and they rolled with it. And nobody, suspected that anything was wrong. Not a single person.
That's crazy. So tell me, what would you tell someone right now that is in a current situation, trapped or feeling kind of trapped in that shame? What would be your first words of advice to them?
The first thing I would tell them is, it is not your fault. There is no need for you to be carrying that shame. It is not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. Because a lot of the times we feel that shame, because sometimes we think, most of the time actually, we think it's our fault. I want to tell them that what happened or what is happening to them, it has nothing to do with their character. Absolutely nothing. And it has everything to do with the abuser. They are the problem here, and they need to just let go of that shame, transfer that shame into the abuser. Don't carry it because you didn't do anything wrong. Why are you carrying that shame when in fact you did absolutely nothing wrong here? So I would tell them that it's not their fault and that they deserve so much more. They deserve the absolute best, and that there is no need to settle for any of that. And the reason for that is because a lot of women, we settle for that, we accept that, and then some of us, we get out of those relationships in a body bag. It's not every woman that has the opportunity to get out of these relationships alive. And I think it's the one thing that the world doesn't realize, that I'm sitting here, I'm telling my story. I live to tell the story, but it is not every woman that gets to do this. Every single day we hear of a woman who was killed by their intimate partner. Every day, whether it's in South Africa or South America, it doesn't matter. We hear of it. The stats are there for us to look at, and numbers don't lie. And so it is not the woman's fault, and they need to stop carrying that shame because it's heavy. The shame is heavy. It will eat you alive. It will eat you alive, and you cannot be your best version when you're carrying that shame. You cannot. You cannot thrive when you're carrying that shame. So you need to let it go.
Yeah. Let's talk about that real quick, because I like to put a positive spin on things. And, like I said, you just really emulate strength, power, and you can tell that you have healed in so many different ways. So tell us now, do you date at all now? How do you find healthy coping and new relationships? What's that look like for you now?
Sure. So for me, it had to start with me. Before I can get into a relationship with Mary, it had to start with me healing, me showing myself love. Because remember, for me, because of the rejection that I felt from my parents, I was never able to love myself because I always thought there's something wrong with me. That's why even my parents don't love me. They don't want me, And it took me a long time. It took a lot of maturity to understand that it wasn't me all along. It wasn't, and that I'm wonderfully made, that I'm an awesome human being. I have a lot of, beautiful characteristics. It took self-acceptance to say it wasn't my fault. I was just an innocent child here. But now I'm a grown adult who understands, why the things that happened to me. For me, my pain has been the biggest clarifier. It's given me so much clarity, and has opened up, so much in terms of my, I can experience life now because I understand, what happened. And so it started with me loving myself unreservedly. Okay. And when I say that, I mean that. Getting up in the morning and telling myself how beautiful I am, and that I'm worthy, and that I deserve the best, and that I'm intelligent, so those positive affirmations every single day. Because remember, when you go through that trauma and that rejection for so long, you kind of get used to being second best at everything that you do. You think you're second best. And so it takes time to build up that confidence and that acceptance to say, no, I'm the whole package here. I'm actually an amazing human being, and I'm worthy, of being loved. And once I did that, that kind of opened up the doors to true love, because when you feel that way about yourself, and you're radiating it, the universe has no other choice but to give you exactly that back. And so you get healthy relationships. And the beautiful thing about it is that because you love yourself the way that you do, you will know when somebody is not loving you the way that you deserve. You will recognize it from the beginning, and you'll be okay saying, no, thank you. This is not for me. So loving myself has been the best part of this whole thing.
That makes a lot of sense.
Part. Yeah.
And you can tell that you feel that way. I mean, it really comes through, and you're getting me pepped up right now. So I know it's doing good stuff for the listeners. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like, who are you today? Because we want to know a little bit more about what it means to be Mrs. Universe, some of that activism that you're doing. Tell us a little bit about what makes you Melody today.
Okay, so I'm a married mother of two. I have two incredible kids who keep me on my toes like 24/7.
Okay.
I'm the reigning Mrs. Universe, as you've said. And really, I started this journey because of the platform that the pageant has, which is domestic violence and abuse. To me, it made sense for me to enter this pageant because I knew that I needed to use the platform, to raise my voice and to create awareness. And I also think I was at a point in my life when I was ready to share my story, but also I was ready for the world to experience who I really am, And so that's where my work of activism started, really.
Yeah.
And it has been an incredible, incredible journey where I've been able to inspire my communities, inspire my country, inspire other victims, other survivors, and just letting them know that, there is life after abuse, and there's a beautiful life after abuse. It does not define who you are, just like your circumstances and where you come from, how you were raised, that doesn't define who you are. I truly believe that all of us, we have a certain kind of magic that we're born with, and we just need to activate it and follow it, and follow that inner voice. And so that's what I'm busy doing at the moment. At the end of this year, actually in a couple of weeks, I will go to South Korea and represent my beautiful country on an international stage, while fighting for such a beautiful cause, and that is domestic violence and abuse. And I cannot absolutely wait to get on that stage, because for me, in peasantry, there's so much cultural exchange that happens where you meet all these beautiful women from different countries, and they bring their own cultures, and it's a beautiful sisterhood. But also to just find out from, other countries, how are they dealing, with this issue of domestic violence and abuse, and see how we can work together, because it's a global issue. And collectively, I truly, truly believe that we can make a difference. It doesn't matter where you come from and your circumstances. I really believe that we can all make a difference when it comes to changing the narrative on abuse. And I'm just looking forward to, traveling a little bit. COVID, unfortunately, it halted our plans to travel. But we're hoping that, we can travel once again and just have my family with me there and witness it. And I never got the opportunity to actually, be on stage, because last year when we had the Mrs. Universe South Africa, everything happened online. So the very first time that I will be stepping on a stage, on a pageant stage, it will be overseas, thousands and thousands of miles away from home. And it's so, it's a little bit nerve-wracking, but I do believe that, God doesn't put you in a place where you don't belong. We are where we are for a reason. And for me, that reason is just to, shatter societal standards and break boundaries. I'm 43 years old, and for the very first time, I'll be competing internationally at my age. We live in a society that tells us, especially women, that when you reach a certain age, you cannot pursue your dreams, you cannot do certain things. And to be able to do that at my age, I couldn't be happier. I really couldn't be happier. I feel so grateful for the opportunities that keep coming my way. I mean, just talking to you right now, it's like when I told my son, I'm like, I'm going to be recording for a podcast and it's based in the USA. He was like, what, Mom, that's amazing. And he's only 6 years old, but, he understands just how big of an opportunity it is, and just making a difference wherever I can, because it's not limited to just my country. If I can change one person's life every single day, I've done my work, and that's all that I can do, really.
That is so true, and absolutely something I agree with. You know, the purpose of this podcast is to inspire others, but if we can save anybody's life or anyone that's hanging on by a thread by hearing your story, you know, that's what really matters. And honestly, just hearing your story has inspired me. And you know, it's funny because I'm also somebody who's gotten past addiction, and, you know, that's something where sometimes you might not have everything in common with a person, but you have, it's almost like you still hear them telling your story. And I know that that's probably what this episode has done for quite a bit of our listeners. Before we part, how can a listener find you if they'd like to follow you, see what you're doing out there, be a part of it? What can they do?
All right. So I am Melody Zondo. That's MELODY ZONDO on all social media platforms. They can find me on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, as well as on YouTube. So that's where they can find me. Please follow my journey. It's not just about the patient, but it's also about, you know, this cause that I'm so passionate about, and something that resonates with me, obviously, as a survivor, but just wanting to make a difference wherever I can. So please follow my journey. It's Melody Zondo all through social media platforms. And yes, I can't wait to connect with all of you and just to hear from you as well, you know, because oftentimes with victims and survivors, we don't like to talk about this. So come into my DMs. I will keep it a secret until you're ready to talk about it. You know, I'm just here to help and to give, you know, advice on how I got through it. And hopefully I can help the next person to get through it.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, that's what we want to be here for. We want to offer that community. And that, you know, really is the purpose of Abuse Recovery Success, is to be a community for those who have endured trauma, overcome addiction. This is your safe place. This is where we spread light. And you are, like I said, a bright light, Melody. Thank you for being on this episode with us. Guys, if you want to catch up on more Abuse Recovery Success, you can find us on our website, abuserecoverysuccess.com. You can also find me at April_the_hills on both TikTok and Instagram, or you can find some of our episodes on YouTube under April Hill. Thanks and have a wonderful day.